second. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, because you said he's waiting.
Yeah, I'll bring him on as soon as the video comes on.
Correct. And then I start once he goes on. Yeah.
And you are live. Start the show.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Everett Kelly, and you are watching Hit the Mark here on Zingo TV and Barn Burner Network. This is our first broadcast, and I'd like to welcome everybody in. And we're looking forward to a very good time today. We have a lot to go over, a lot going on the last couple of days. I'd like to bring in my co-host, as this is our first time, and it's a little chaotic, but we're getting in control of things. We have Candid Frank up in Canada. We have Lance Goodman of NFL Exporter out in LA. So we're all over the world today. And let's go first up to Canada. Frank, how you doing today?
Fantastic. A great weather up here. It's starting to look like football weather for the early season for us here in Canada. And I know you guys are looking forward to training camp.
Yeah, training camp, right? Right now, I'm looking forward to getting outside and not being, less than 50 degrees. In New York, here on Long Island, the weather has been so cold, and it is very unlike what I'm used to. Growing up as a kid, we had, at the end of April, you usually could wear short sleeve shirts. Now you're out in your winter coat still. But anyway, as we wait Lance to get on, and I'll introduce him. The NFL draft happened this past weekend, and there was a lot of surprises in the NFL draft, but I think the biggest surprise to me was 55 million viewers. If you can imagine that, we're going to have a couple guests on from my hometown here on Long Island to talk about the draft at 12:40. We have Errol Marks and Speedy coming on, and from Worldwide Sports Radio Network. And I would like to ask you, Frank, did you get a chance to watch the draft? What did you think of it?
Well, what I thought of the draft was what I found amazing, and there really is a question because it went so well. There were hardly any glitches, if any. Everybody seemed to be okay with everybody being casually dressed. The commissioner's M&Ms and all. The whole thing was laid back, and it looked like a lot of fun, and it went without any glitches. And the draft was, I think, as compelling as it always is. Yeah, it was missing, the athletes, after having a college career, getting to that point, especially the first round draft picks, getting up on the stage. That didn't happen, but I didn't miss it too much.
I was under the impression that there would be less of the, I liked seeing some of the things I saw. Belichick's dog might have been a little over the top, but hey, I had my dog on my show the other day too, so that's okay. And to tell you the truth, now I wouldn't want. He probably has that dog like trained in 8 different languages to attack and do everything else. You could see the way he was sitting behind the computer that this dog is not your average dog. He probably could, do his taxes if he had to. But I thought that was a unique way to really get in and be part of the broadcast with fans, because fans got a great look behind the scenes.
Yes, they did. And what they saw was not only the regular excitement of the fans in the stadium, which was missing, and the families and friends in the middle of that group. They got to see the inner workings of the family unit. It got to the point where sometimes you began to wonder who was the star of the show on each of those Zoom screens. It was something to behold, to be sure. It gave the opportunity for family, girlfriends, wives to get a little more me time. Maybe possibly, maybe too much, but that's left up to each person's discretion.
Yeah, I think that it was something that for the times is, look, everybody's got other concerns on their mind right now. You saw just how desperate people are for sports right now because of the over 55 million viewers. Are you kidding me? That's just an insane amount of people watching an NFL draft. When you consider when it first started, it was the people who were staying in their mother's basement, essentially, or the stat guys who, knew about the draft long before Mel Kiper ever did. And now it's become this almost like holiday-like event where you have fans and you have the people getting dressed up. It's almost like a Comic-Con, the NFL draft. So the way it was done this year was, I thought, with all the other things going on now, telemedicine and being able to communicate, work from home, all that stuff, this was a really unique way to show what goes on behind the scenes at an NFL draft room. So I got to appreciate that as a fan, as someone who had worked at ESPN and been involved with that before. I love it. Understanding what's going on, but for other people, it was very good to see. Like I enjoyed that. Other people got a chance to see that.
What I found surprising in the draft was it's been pretty quiet up there in New York. Usually after the NFL draft, there's a whole bunch of posts, there's a whole bunch of whining, there's a whole bunch of complaining. Why didn't they pick this quarterback instead of that quarterback? When are they going to pick somebody that can help our team be better? In both New York's teams, usually at the draft, there's always a lot of I'll call it backbiting, second guessing of the organizations. This year, there seems to be none. They went safe with safe picks. I guess that to me was one of the surprises of the draft.
Yeah, I think that there were a couple surprises to me. Obviously, you had Jalen Hurts being drafted at number 53. You had the Raiders taking the cornerback they did at number 19. And I think that maybe that, when you don't have access to some things maybe you're used to, or the environment's different, you never know what's going to happen in that situation, like the one we're in now. So I think there's a lot that you got to play on, by year. And, once again, tell me what it's like up in Canada, how they view the NFL draft.
We view it just as you do. You worked for ESPN. TSN is becoming more and more. They're using the ESPN partnership more and more. So everything that you see in ESPN, we see up here in TSN. We have the NFL Football Network, so we're up to speed with what's going on in the NFL in as far as the experts are concerned. We don't have all the other sports networks to speak of which I don't know because I'm not in the U.S., but I do know that I can watch a lot of news when it comes to the NFL. And I think the biggest thing is that this is the, in quotes, just because I wanted to do that, the first big event in sports during the pandemic. Everything's grounded to a halt. Even UFC that tried to get things going didn't. WWE in Florida hasn't stopped. They got permission to continue doing what they're doing. But outside of that, there's been very little or nothing. It's all been about, what are we canceling in April? What are we canceling in May? What are we canceling in June? What are we canceling in July? What's going to be around in August? So this was awesome. This was a great opportunity for sports fans to actually pick on some fresh meat. And us sports fans and us sports people who cover sports, we're dying to get our teeth into something, to sink our teeth into something. And this was something, finally, some fresh meat.
Finally, we got a chance to see something other than old, even though I love watching old games. I love watching historical matchups, breakdown of events, what went on behind the scenes. And we got a little bit of that last night with episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance. Did you happen to see that?
Well, I didn't see the episodes. I can only tell you what I've heard about it. And it's been interesting, the parts that I've heard about and the parts that I've watched. I didn't get a chance to see it last night.
What do you remember about it that stuck out to you in your mind?
Well, what sticks out in my mind is this is an opportunity to look at a great team a great organization, one of the greatest players to ever play the game. And to actually, what I like about it and the parts that I saw that I really liked about it, the news behind the story was awesome. That's great. The new information or the information we forgot is awesome to hear about. What I really enjoy is watching the actual parts of the games that they show us. And it's amazing how it sets a how can I put this, a realistic, not godlike image of a guy like Michael Jordan. You actually see him on the floor, but that doesn't mean he isn't, his great play isn't evident, but it's a great way to look at the way the game was played.
And joining us from California, we have Lance Goodman. Lance, how you doing today from NFLExporter.com? Lance, me and you talked about the draft in detail yesterday. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you gentlemen doing? Thanks for having me in.
We are doing great.
Me too.
As we're learning, this is all fun for all of us. But also on the line now, we have a couple guys that are from Long Island that I used to work with that are waiting to talk about the NFL draft as well. We have Speedy and we have Errol from Worldwide Sports Radio Network. Guys, can you hear me? Are you on?
I'm on.
Kyle, how you doing?
Hi,
Kyle,
Mark. How are you? Hope you're staying safe.
Yeah, you too. We know Kyle is Speedy. He's kind of someone I say burns the midnight oil. I don't know if Kyle ever gets any sleep. He constantly is working, whether it's posting videos or whether it's doing other things to help out where he works at Worldwide Radio. And it's a pleasure to have him on. He's a guy that really knows his stuff. Kyle, being in New York now, seeing what the Jets and Giants did, what was your impression kind of how that went for them?
I actually think they did very well, both teams. I think the Jets actually were one of the better draft grades that I've seen. I think they got very good value throughout the draft, I think, for the most part. Mekhi Becton, I mean, he's a little raw in terms of pass blocking, but beyond that, a very good pick, good size, great run blocking ability. Denzel Mims is a steal round, too, and I think they did really well in the third round with those extra picks they traded back for Zuniga and getting the corner they did, Ashton Davis. Bryce Hall later on, I think, was a really good pick because he would have been probably a second round pick if he didn't get hurt. He was actually one of the more talented corners. So I think the Jets did very well for the most part in terms of getting good value and filling needs. I don't think they really left much behind. They tried to balance it out with what they needed. As for the Giants, they didn't do everything I expected them to do, but again, I think they still got good value too. They filled needs as well. Andrew Thomas, I wanted Isaiah Simmons number 4, but if they took a tackle, I liked it to be Andrew Thomas. And I think they did well with McKinney. I think they did well with some of their later picks as well, getting good depth.
And something Lance and I talked about yesterday when we did a review of the draft, kind of like how Isaiah Simmons was passed over by a few teams. One of the concerns I have about the Jets is that in the second round, they got Mims from Baylor, wide receiver. Okay. Here's a couple names I'm going to throw at you, and this is why I have problems with the Jets taking a wide receiver in the second round. Okay? Stephen Hill, Devin Smith, Alex Van Dyke, Ryan Yarborough, Reggie Rembert, and Ralph Clayton. They were all second-round draft picks of the Jets as wide receivers. Have you ever heard of any of them?
I know Smith and Hill. That's it.
Exactly. And they were supposed to be what Mims is, which is a guy that Stephen Hill was a speed guy who was a project, and he played 2 years. Devin Smith was a speedster at Howard State. He didn't work out. To me, the history of the Jets drafting second-round wide receivers is abysmal. So that's why I'm a little concerned about that. But some of the other teams in the AFC, NFC East, the Dolphins with Tua, how did you like that one?
Tua in itself, I liked. The rest of the draft, I wasn't as crazy about. I think they reached a lot at the rest of their first-round picks. I think everyone knew for the most part they were getting Tua. I know they were trying to get the smoke screens out, but everyone knew they were going to get Tua. But I think beyond that, I think they reached a lot. I like Raekwon Davis in the second round. I like Curtis Weaver later, but they kind of did like too many unknowns in the first round. Austin Jackson is a decent tackle. I don't think he'll be a top tackle. And then the corner they drafted at number 30 in Noah I cannot pronounce his name, Igbanage from Auburn. I think he's more of a system fit that could work, but I don't think he's that first round type number one corner. So I think they did a lot of reaching for considering how many draft picks they had. But again, I think everyone knew they were going to take Tua, so they had to take some level of offensive line. I just think it was some of the wrong players.
Okay, let me bring in Lance here. Lance for NFLexporter.com, someone who knows the NFL really well. He's got a question about the Eagles and Cowboys for you. Lance, go ahead.
Yes, so just concerning the Eagles, the main topic that came out that was perplexing to a lot of people was about the Eagles taking Jalen Hurd, the quarterback from Oklahoma, in the 6th round, considering the fact that Carson Wentz is still young, at least in terms of quarterback years, at 27 years of age. He's fully guaranteed $100 million. With Philadelphia having so many, or I don't want to say so many, but having enough other important areas that they needed to address, a lot of people were confused about why Philadelphia spent the draft pick in the 2nd round on a quarterback so high, considering their current quarterback situation.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't get it either. I think the Eagles either needed linebacker or corner in that spot. They took the receiver in the 1st round, and I think either Christian Fulton or somebody like Zach Bond could have been a good value pick for them in the 2nd, especially since, again, while Hurts is a better backup quarterback than what they have with Nate Sudfeld, I mean, you don't take a backup quarterback with that value of a pick. I think Hurts would have been there in the 3rd, maybe the 4th, if they wanted to wait longer. Now, I trust the Eagles in terms of them knowing what to do with mobile quarterbacks. So I think if there's anyone that'll get the best out of Hurts, it could be the Eagles with that coaching staff and that history of running quarterbacks. But in terms of the actual value of the pick, I agree with you. I didn't understand.
Lance, you got another one about the Cowboys, or?
Yeah, sure. And I just wanted to, share with the gentleman what we talked about yesterday. At least the sense that I tried to make of the Eagles picking, Hurt so high up in the 2nd round. I'm thinking that one, Carson Wentz does have an injury history. I don't think any of us can ignore that. I'm pretty sure that Philadelphia wanted to bring in a quarterback who was a little bit more acclimated to that pistol shotgun type system that Doug Peterson does run. I totally agree. I don't see how we can really justify taking them that high, but just in terms of value and usage, maybe when it comes to to the Cowboys to the Eagles defense facing some mobile other quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts could be a guy to step in and play that role perfectly. When they play teams like Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, some of the more mobile quarterbacks in the NFL, Russell Wilson, so they can get some real-time practice against, a lot of times they have to bring up guys from the practice squads or things of that nature to perfect that role. The other thing that I also found was interesting is perhaps if they're going to try to keep Carson Wentz healthy for the long run, in some of those goal line or short yardage situations, all of a sudden you could have Jalen Hurts come in and do some of those wildcat type of things. So, that was kind of the sense I tried to make of it with them drafting them so high. Wasn't sure if Philly had a pick in the 3rd round. I think we've kind of seen things trending in the last couple years there. Even if, and I think we've seen that on display in this draft a lot, to where even if a player wasn't getting picked where he was projected or graded out, teams were just going and getting the guys that they like and like the most in terms of what information they had on them. And we all know, due to the coronavirus situation, teams weren't able to really fully evaluate players how they usually do.
You hear that, Speedy?
Yeah, I did. I agree with him to an extent. I also think it's more the Eagles' history of the running type quarterback too. You hit it on the head, Lance, with the mobile quarterbacks in the division and what they faced. I think in terms of in terms of their history of mobile quarterbacks is more what I was referring to. They had Randall Cunningham. They had Donovan McNabb. They were able to rebirth for a couple of years Michael Vick. Now they have Carson Wentz, who, again, because the injury hasn't been able to run as much, but still, I think that will help in terms of just the judgment of how to do it. It's always been something that's been a staple in their franchise. So from that essence, I think if there's any team that could get something out of Jalen Hurts in terms of value, it's the Eagles. But again, like I said, I still don't think that justifies him taking them that early.
Yeah, I agree. I think
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's something Lance and I talked about yesterday too. About to me, Jalen Hurts. The big thing Jalen Hurts gives is leadership. He can handle being a backup. He can handle adversity. I think that's a big part of how he's going to help Philadelphia and his experience. And also, I heard a lot of people talking about too is diversity, being able to run and give a different look, possibly take some of the pressure off Hurts in some key goal line situations, kind of like what the Steelers did with Cordell Stewart back in the day, the original Slash. Frank, I want to get you in here. I didn't forget you up there. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, I don't feel forgotten.
For a couple of days.
I don't feel for. I'm enjoying listening to their opinion. In fact, I have a question for them.
Okay, go ahead, Frank.
How do they think Miami did?
I think Miami, for the most part, reached more than I expected them to. I think everyone knew they were going to take Tua. So I think that was like the no-brainer kind of thing you had to do. But after that, I did not love it. Raekwon Davis, I think, was a good pick late in the second round. I think for the rest of it, they really reached a lot, though. Austin Jackson, I think, was more of a second-round prospect. They took him a bit early. The corner at Auburn, Noah Iganabe, more of a system fit that could work, but he's not going to be a top-end corner where I'd take him in the first round. And then Robert Hunt, too, I think they could have waited on a little longer into the third. So I think they've just lost some value that way, in essence, where I think they could have maximized those picks further, especially on defense in the first round. And then they could have gone with more offensive line depth because the top 4 tackles were off the board at that point for Miami. So once Tampa took Wirfs, you could say, all right, if you're Miami, we can wait to the second round to deal with the line. Let's bolster up defense with maybe getting Chase on at 18 and then maybe a linebacker like Queen or Murray at 26, or again, something else on that defensive line. So I think they reached a lot for the most part with a lot of picks.
Yeah, Lance,
my sentiments are definitely along the same line. I think, from an impact standpoint, I love the Tua pick. Let's face it, we know this Dolphins franchise for the longest of times has been desperately searching to get a franchise quarterback in there. And if it weren't for Tua's injury, we think at least, we don't know because if Joe Burrow had the same exact type year he did, maybe teams would have still took him ahead of Tua, but Tua was definitely the guy coming into this past year that was supposed to be the number 1 pick. Tank for Tua, was the kind of slogan going around for a while. So I love the Tua.
We seem to have a little bit of a streaming situation with
play the type of football he did last year will be more than handle things for this year. But I think
Lance, we're having a hard time picking you up. If you could just wait a couple seconds because you're coming in and out. We have Errol joining us now as well from Worldwide Sports Radio. Before we get to him, I know Frank, if there's anything else that you want to ask?
Yeah, you mentioned a point that every year is a concern, and we talked about it last week, and that is a player's physical condition at draft time or leading up to the draft. We had a couple of players have that effect and move down, and that happens every year. What players do you think moved down more than they should have, guys?
I think for me, I think Christian Fulton was definitely one in the second round that surprisingly dropped, as well as AJ Espinosa. I think those were the two, I think, when you look at dropping as far as they did, because it was supposed to be a heavy corner draft for the most part, but also in terms of Fulton, he had a great year. It was the first year as a number one corner with LSU. He was their best corner. I know Derek Stingley's getting all the hype, but he's performance-wise was their best corner. And then as for Epinesa, I think in terms of just how little pass rush there was in this draft for the whole draft, obviously Chase Young, the big name, and then you had Chase on, but there wasn't a lot. I'm surprised that it took until Buffalo, a team that really didn't need much defense, for him to get drafted. So I'm surprised those two names definitely fell out of the first round. And some of the safeties too. I think Delpit, who was my favorite safety, him falling out of the first round. McKinney, who went to my Giants, I'm surprised he didn't go in the first round. So it was mainly a lot of defensive prospect. It seems like this draft was prioritized, even though I think the talent and quality was more prioritized towards defense. There was more offensive draft picks in the first round, and the late first round made it very strange. There were a lot of bizarre picks.
Yeah. Staying on that, we have Errol Marks joining us as well from Worldwide Sports Radio Network. Errol and Joe Pesich and Eduardo from Barnburner, guys I owe a lot to as far as getting me back into doing radio and now back on TV. Errol, how are you doing today? What is your opinion of, I know you have strong feelings about Amari Cooper and the Cowboys. How do you feel they did in the draft?
I think the Cowboys did the best. I think they had an A+ draft. CD Lamb was sitting right there. I think he's one of the best wide receivers in this draft class. Explosive, not a lot of speed on the outside. A lot of people say that was his weakness, but his hands are unbelievable. The guy's got tremendous understanding of route running and finding the holes in the field. You saw what he did this year with Oklahoma. Incredible. And I like what the Cowboys did. The Cowboys really, a lot of people said they didn't do this and they didn't do that. They added defensive talent. They did. In the later rounds, they gave themselves some defensive talent. They added a center, which they needed. They lost Frederick. They added one of the best centers in the draft, later in the draft. I think the Cowboys did sensational. So I love what the Cowboys did.
I agree with you. I think also a big
Stop. Yeah.
Kyle mentioned it before. A big pick that worked out really well for the Giants, where they got him, was Xavier McKinney out of Alabama, a guy probably who would have been taken in the first round if Alabama didn't have such a bad year defensively. What do you think of that pick?
I think it was a great pick. I think Jerry Jones had one of his best. Jerry Jones had one of his best drafts this year, and he was on his yacht doing it.
Yeah, right.
When you look at Jerry Jones and what he has done the last couple of years, it kind of throws you back on some of the things that he has done. I think they needed to restructure their offensive line. Their weakness in their offensive line for years was Frederick, because Frederick was hurt with the problem that he had, the sickness that he had. He was out for almost 2 years. So they had no center. They had to shift their offensive line. Their offensive line is getting old. They needed to add a center. I thought that was the most important position of need for them. They needed to reconstruct their offensive line. Ask anybody, what was the Cowboys' strength all these years? It was their offensive line. Why were they a good team all these years? Even with, to me, a second-tier quarterback like Dak Prescott. It's their offensive line. And this offensive line, say whatever you want, this is a very old offensive line. The best player on that offensive line is, to me, one of the best guards in football, in Martin. That's it. You can't really look at what they did 2-3 years ago. They lost an offensive lineman. He went to the Broncos. Another offensive lineman retired. This is a team that's starting to shift, and their offensive line, everybody knows you win football games with your defensive line and your offensive line. That's what you need to reconstruct. And I think it was when you look at the Cowboys as an organization, as a full organization, the one thing you have to look at them is they needed a number one wide receiver. I don't care what anybody says about Amari Cooper. He's not a number one. He's probably the best number two in football. They needed a guy. They needed an explosive guy that can make plays in the open field. Dak overthrows a lot of passes. They need a guy that's going to go up there and get it. He's that guy. He's a guy that can go up and get the ball. That was the two most important draft picks I think they needed to get. They got them. They got themselves a center that can reconstruct their offensive line, and they got themselves a wide receiver that can help on the other side of the ball in a West Coast offense. And Mike McCarthy, it's not a running game. They're not defined through their running game. They're defined through wide receivers that can run routes, and that's what they have now with CD Lamb.
Very good. Lance, you got a question for Errol?
No, I didn't really have a question. I just, my sentiments about CeeDee Lamb are the same. I'm a guy who definitely feels that in the NFL, for the most part, your team identity is going to be on one side of the football or the other. And for the Dallas Cowboys, some of the things that Errol was alluding to, for me, when I look at the Cowboys over the last, let's just say the couple when it was Tony Romo, when it was DeMarco Murray, when it was Dez Bryant, Terrence Williams, the younger Jason Witten, that offensive line that he speaks of that really took over as the top offensive line in the NFL, the Cowboys never really were a stout defensive team. They were a team that scored a lot of points, were in a lot of shootouts, had a defense that really wasn't that well, was really amongst like maybe the bottom half of the NFL. I think in 2000, the 2 years since Dak Prescott has been there, along with Ezekiel Elliott and some of the new blood in that Cowboys offensive line has gotten older. Their defense really hasn't been stout either. They had the one really good year back in 2000. Basically, the 2 years that Dallas went to the playoffs, their defense played much, much better. But I like the addition of CeeDee Lamb. Gives you excellent depth in case something does happen to Amari Cooper or Michael Gallup. We know that CeeDee Lamb is a guy who works from the slot. And they lost Randall Cobb. They lost Cole Beasley the year before that. So now when you come out and you run your 3 wide receiver sets, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that somebody shouldn't be able to get open. And I love the pick. I'm all about bringing in the best talent available. I think that pick fell into Dallas's lap, and I think he's going to come in and pay immediate dividends for the Cowboys. They were a team to me that really didn't have a ton of areas that they needed to address. I really look at teams just being able to get better. And I think the Cowboys offense, especially when you look at Dak Prescott and you're thinking about paying him and what you're trying to do, you want to give him as many weapons as possible. So I definitely love the pick in CeeDee Lamb. And then they came back in the second round. We know in free agency they lost Byron Jones. And so they went out and got a defensive back from Alabama. Me and Mark talked about this yesterday, to where there were a couple positions. Defensive back was one of them, to where Okuda and CJ Anderson were hands down the top 2 guys. And then from there, it was really, teams going after the guy that they felt would best suit their needs. So when you look at Dallas bringing in some extra firepower on offense, and then second round addressing a defensive back need, I think I like what the Cowboys did there.
Frank, you're up.
Yeah, gentlemen, I agree with both Lance and Errol. Great points. The Cowboys, got help up the middle and downfield. That was very important. And the question I have, a lot of times we key on players that are drafted because of who and what they are and what they bring. Like the Dallas situation where they drafted to help Dak Prescott, having another guy downfield, another weapon, and to help the running back Ezekiel Elliott with an offensive lineman that can help make those holes work. What other teams made those kinds of moves where you don't really see it? This is where you experts really get to kick in. The moves that they make that help the rest of the team, or a specific area where maybe they might be a little light or a little weak.
Errol?
I could tell you a team right now, and a team that I root for, the New York Jets. They did a lot of things in the middle of the rounds. A lot of people are questioning. They brought in a backup quarterback. Everybody's like, why did they bring in a backup quarterback when they have Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold's only been 2 years in the league. He's one of the youngest quarterbacks in the league. Why does that make any sense? They need a backup quarterback. They need a reliable backup quarterback. Sam has not played full seasons in the 2 years he's been in the league. They need a guy that can come in and be consistent. They didn't have that when Sam got hurt last year. And you saw that when he was out with mono. So that was something. Also, the Jets needed some help at the offensive line. Everybody thought when they brought in Becton, oh, that's all they're going to do. That's all they need. No, they went after another offensive lineman from Carolina, and he's going to pay big dividends because him and Becton actually trained together. They're actually good friends, and they needed somebody that, even though they brought in Font, and Font could play left tackle this year, and Becton could play right tackle. Font's only signed a 3-year deal, and really, I could see the Jets deciding after this year to decide to move away from Font and bring in the young kid from Carolina and shift him to the right side and move Becton to the left side. They needed to reconstruct different positions. They brought in Ashton in the 3rd round, who I thought was a steal. Ashton Davis, great pick for the New York Jets. I believe on my board, the 2nd best safety in the draft. And he fell to the Jets. Nobody even knew who he was except all these different scouts and everything. He did great in the combine. He shows speed. He's a track and field runner. Guy has explosive speed. And everybody says, well, the reason why the Jets brought him in is because they're getting rid of Jamal Adams. Boy, oh boy, that is so untrue. The Jets are right now trying to figure out a deal with where it makes sense for Jamal Adams and the New York Jets, where they can keep Jamal Adams, move Ashton in a cornerback position where they can put him in the nickel. They can use him in different positions where they can shift him to the cornerback position in certain plays in a Williams defense, and they can move him in the safety position if Marcus May, who's been an injury-prone player over the years with the New York Jets, where they can shift him in there to play free safety or a strong safety for him if they need Jamal Adams to blitz. The one thing that I question with the New York Jets that I understand everybody's going to say there's not a lot of edge rushers in this past draft. That's fine. They brought in the kid from Florida who is a good run stopper, who can actually still, rush on the edge. They don't have a dominant edge rusher. And if you want to win in this league, you need a dominant edge rusher to help solidify your defensive line. They brought in Quentin Williams last year. He really didn't develop because he was getting triple teamed. Same thing that happened with Leonard Williams. Now, is Leonard Williams as good as Quentin Williams as far as talent is concerned? No, he's not. But we're never going to see the strength of Quentin Williams until the Jets figure out a way to bring in a good pass rusher, somebody like a John Abraham that can give them that depth to get Quentin Williams open to make plays in the middle of the field. So I like what the Jets did. I give the Jets, and I know Mark's waiting for me to answer his question about the Jets. I gave the Jets an A-. I think Joe Douglas trading down the way he did in the 2nd round, getting the extra 3rd round draft pick, which he traded to the New England Patriots to get 2 4th round draft picks and a 6th, was sensational. We haven't seen a Jets GM do that in a very long time. We haven't seen anybody do that. And then they get the wide receiver that they always wanted anyways. Mims fell to them at 59. That was an unbelievable move for the New York Jets. But people are questioning the second day. Why did they get Perrine from Florida? He's a power back. His college career wasn't as extraordinary as some of these running backs in the draft. But he even said it when the Jets interviewed him when they told him he was coming to New York. He says, "You won't be sorry." So we got to see these guys develop, and it's all about development. We don't know what these draft classes are going to be. We don't know. Maybe the Jets hit a home run. Maybe they didn't. But in the last, you know this, Mark, more than anybody, the Jets in the last 7 or 8 years, their 2nd round picks have been horrendous. Terrible. Yep. And I think Denzel Mims, who I think was 3rd best wide receiver on my board, I took him over Ruggs. I would have taken Mims over Ruggs. He's very explosive on the outside, acrobatic, reminds me of a Hopkins. He reminds me of a Hopkins that was just traded to Arizona, who I think is the best wide receiver in football. Now, I don't know if Mims is going to turn into a great wide receiver. We don't know. He's got to develop, and they got to coach him right. I don't trust Adam Gase to do that.
Yeah, me neither.
He's young, and he has an opportunity to grow with, to me, one of the most talented young quarterbacks in the NFL.
So staying in the AFC East, with the Patriots, no Brady, the Bills, the team to beat in the AFC East?
I do not believe the Bills are the team, and I'm not saying this as a Jet fan. I think the Bills made a lot of good acquisitions in the offseason. They brought in Josh Norman. He's a cancer in the locker room. Everybody knows that. If he's not doing anything or he's not getting his ways, he's gonna cause problems over there in that locker room. They brought in Stephon Diggs. He's another guy that has come out. People have come out and said that he's been a cancer in the locker room. He didn't like Kirk Cousins. Him and Thielen didn't get along in the locker room. How is he going to benefit going there with a young quarterback? And how is the young quarterback in Josh Allen going to benefit with a guy that has a big mouth? Everybody was talking about the Jets making a move to bring in a big-time wide receiver this offseason, bringing in maybe an Odell Beckham. The Jets weren't stupid enough to do that because Odell Beckham is a quarterback killer. And we've seen this over and over again everywhere he goes. Look what Baker Mayfield's dealing with all the talent. I think the Jets right now, on paper, if this offensive line is reconstructed and they give Sam some time, I think the Jets could win the division this year. I really do. Wow. I think Buffalo has the better all-around defense. They do. You can't argue that. They do. But again, you can't question what Joe Douglas has so far done in the offseason. He said he wanted to bulk up in the offensive line. He bulked up. He added 4 free agents in the offseason.
Mhm.
And then he added 2 offensive linemen in a draft. That's 6 new offensive linemen. And they still have control of Brian Winters if they want to keep him. So they reconstructed that. They need a pass rusher. Maybe they make a trade some way or another. I love their 6th-round draft pick and bringing in Hall, who a lot of people think could have been a 1st-round draft pick, early 2nd-round draft pick. He tore his Achilles.
Right, at that quarterback.
And he's going to miss the whole season this year. But here's the thing. When he comes back, the Jets might have a number 1 corner that they could just move and shift right into that number 1 corner position. And next year in the draft, they don't have to go after a corner. They can bring in edge rushers, bring in wide receivers to help Sam Darnold out. So what Joe Douglas did was strategic. He did the right thing. And here's another thing about the New England Patriots. There was a reason why New England didn't draft a quarterback in this year's draft class. Everybody knows why they didn't. And I don't care what anybody says. They really think that they're going to be that bad where they can make a move to get Lawrence or Fields in next year's draft. I really do believe that. I don't think they believe Stidham is the future quarterback of this team. I really don't. Brian Hoyer. We all know what Brian Hoyer is.
Right.
Okay. He's a journeyman quarterback who knows Bill Belichick's offense.
Right.
And that's the only reason why he's there. And he's a leader. I do believe that they believe that even if they're the 10th worst team in the league, they're going to have a shot at Lawrence or Fields. But remember this, I don't care if these teams that are the 1st or 2nd worst team in the league, I don't care, because if whoever gets the 1st pick next year, no matter if they have a starting quarterback or not, they're going to draft Lawrence. They're going to draft him because everything that we've heard about him, he's the next Andrew Luck. So that's what I think.
Thank you very much, guys, for coming on. Speedy and Errol Marks from Worldwide Sports Radio. Guys, tell us where they can find you on the internet.
Absolutely. You can find us by going to our website at www.worldwidesportsradio.com. Find us on all the social medias, WWSRN_radio on Instagram and Facebook, Worldwide Sports Radio Network on Facebook. And our shows are, we have a bunch of great shows right now. We still have the Morning Boys. We have Below the Mic and Down to the Wire and Caged in MMA. And we have all the different shows. And we're working on some big things coming up for all the fans. So, and read our stories. We have great writers. And I want to give a shout out to Jillian and Ricky, our 2 social media people. They're doing a sensational job on what they're doing for us. So I'm loving what we're doing and we're moving forward, and a lot of great things coming up very, very soon.
Very good. Thank you for joining us, guys. You guys have a good day.
Thanks. You too.
Yep.
Nice meeting you.
Lance, Frank, you heard some of the comments that were made about the NFL draft. As we move on to a couple of other stories that happened in the sports world today, I think the Saints have been rumored to going after Jameis Winston to come in and back up Drew Brees. To me, that is, when you look at what Winston did last year, 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, it's kind of like Wilbur Wood, a pitcher for the Chicago White Sox, who won 20 and lost 20 in the same year. Like a statistical oddity that probably will never happen again. Lance and then Frank, what do you think about Winston going to New Orleans?
Yeah, I like it. Jameis Winston is the guy who, obviously struggles with turnovers. There's no way that can be denied. So I think, getting with a head coach, Peyton, getting behind Drew Brees, certainly is a good look for Winston. I think that when you look at the way that Teddy Bridgewater was able to go over to New Orleans last year and revitalize his career. Now, obviously, a lot of that revitalization came from Drew Brees being hurt and Bridgewater being able to showcase his ability. You don't know if that's going to be the case for Winston, but in terms of having a good, reliable backup, I mean, you're getting a starting caliber quarterback to come in behind Drew Brees if needed. And I think for the Saints, this was a good look for them. Obviously, with Winston being in the same division, they've had a chance to look at him really well. And I just think that, when you look at bringing him in from a pure quarterback standpoint, because they also have Taysom Hill, who's a Swiss Army knife at this point. But I like the move. I think it's something that you'd anticipate. Drew Brees did have to miss some time. Jameis Winston is a guy who can come in and have an opportunity to run the football effective. I mean, to run the offense effectively. So I totally get it. I think everybody knew after that Jameis Winston and Cam Newton, two starting caliber backs, at that point would get a little bit more attention. So 1 year deal, high risk, high risk, low reward. Low risk and high reward for the Saints.
Mm-hmm. Frank, what do you?
An opportunity to get behind some Hall of Fame guys.
Please forgive me, Lance. Sometimes it lags a little bit, so I think you're done. I'm so sorry if I interrupted you. Frank, what do you think?
No.
I'm sorry. Frank, what you see, knowing Winston's 5,000 yards, only a handful of guys did that in the NFL history, and he's going to be a backup. What's your view on what Winston's best for his career at this point? You think it's going to New Orleans or looking for a starting job?
Whether that happens or not, this has got to be Drew Brees' year. I think everybody's pulling for him to maybe lift that Vince Lombardi trophy. They want to. I know he's done it once. He's been a hard luck quarterback. I really like the move of them signing, like you mentioned, Lance Taysom Hill. That's an important signing for them. Yep. The New Orleans Saints are a much better team than even their record shows, and their record was pretty good. This is the beauty of the NFL. It's not just the moves that you make at the front of the draft. It's not just the moves that you make in the off season with free agents. It's about everything, and it's all interlocking. And the key is going to be Drew Brees for that team. What he gets help-wise out of this draft, the growth of the players around him. I like what they did, and I really like this signing of their running back for 2 more years.
I think that Taysom Hill is exactly why the Eagles went after a guy like Jalen Hurts. NFL's a copycat league. You see how much success the Ravens are having with Jackson. The Seahawks have with Russell Wilson. The Texans have with Deshaun Watson. This is what, the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. NFL is becoming a league where your quarterback needs to be able to be mobile and get out and create plays when the plays break down. A couple other things in the news that happened today or yesterday that got my attention. Tulane player by the name of Tashawn Hightower was indicted on murder. He was the leading scorer for Tulane last year in their basketball team. What is going on, Frank?
You know what? Let's be real here. I really, with stories like this, take a pool of thousands of people and you're going to find all kinds in that pool. I don't think we can define NFL players by virtue of what we hear about, especially considering the microscope that NFL or football players file under. I think what he's done is what another person in society's done, and it just happens to be that he's in football. I really don't like these kinds of stories being attributed to him being a football player. I think he's a guy that did something that happens to be a football player. That's where I sit on it.
Mm-hmm. There was another prospect of Louisville prospect in football that was murdered over the weekend. Lance, what can we do out there in a time like this? We have prospects. What college football is like. How all these programs of what they're involved in that we have to keep secret and that nobody knows, and there's so many underhand dealings. But yet these are kids, these are families, these are communities that are being affected. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, condolences go out, to this young man, his family. Obviously, he, had a bright future ahead of himself. And I think it's just unfortunate that these type things take place. I agree with Frank. When I hear things just going around the world in general, sometimes it seems a little astounding, but then you think about, how many people are out there in the world. So something's always going to be happening. I didn't get a chance to fully read the story, so I'm not sure if this is a case of wrong place, wrong time. I don't know if this is something, a previous altercation sparked this, but it's unfortunate for basically NFL players, some celebrity athletes, notable figures. I'll say notable public figures. It's just unfortunate a lot of times because as much love and support that they may get, and as well like they may be, you always have individuals who are jealous. Jealousy and envy are a lot of time the root causes of these situations. And when you are a target at that point, unfortunately, that's what you become. When somebody finds out that you have an opportunity to make the NFL, or a lot of times it's your environment. When people in your environment and surroundings find out you have an opportunity to do better for yourself and remove yourself from that environment, then like I said, jealousy and envy and a lot of unfortunate things come into play. So I think it's very unfortunate, and it's something that you see go on a lot. It may not always end in murder, but you hear about athletes all the time, being robbed of things and houses broken into and cars being stolen. I know I'm out here in Los Angeles, and Derwin James, the third-year safety now for the Chargers, when he came out here his first year as a rookie, he was in Beverly Hills. He was riding in a very expensive car, and people approached him at gunpoint and stole his car and jewelry. So it's unfortunate, but it's something that is very common amongst when people become famous or notable, they become targets.
I don't know if you remember, there was a player called Lyman Bostic who was played for the Minnesota Twins, who was an outstanding outfielder in the 70s, and he was murdered on an off day visiting a friend that was there was a relationship with that a man thought he was having with his wife. He was not that person, and he wound up being shot because of that. And situations like this, you hear of, you see. The recruit's name was Dexter Rentz. He was a young wide receiver that was heading to the University of Louisville. And when you combine that along with Tayshaun Hightower and his situation at basketball in Tulane, athletes are just like everyone else. Some of these younger kids, the situations they find themselves in because of whatever is going on, whether it's big money or whether it's being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or God knows what. My heart goes out to them. My heart goes out to their family. My prayers are with them and their family, and everything they're going through at this time, as well as everyone else out there who has suffered a loss or someone who's sick or suffering from this coronavirus. Staying in the sports world, obviously getting off to a little bit of a more positive, positive. What's the word I'm looking for? I'm having. I can't think of words right now. I'm so tongue tied. But
a positive spin on life. A positive spin. A positive spin on life.
News. Yes. Other items in the news. Alabama. You know how well Alabama recruits. They have Pruitt was their defensive coordinator now at Tennessee. He pulled a little bit of a coup, getting the best prospect in Alabama, the state of Alabama, defensive player by the name of Brooks, to commit to Tennessee for 2021. It's something that Nick Saban's always in the top 5. Still is, doesn't matter. He'll still get a boatload of recruits to go to Alabama. But I think it's interesting to see that Pruitt, who was an Alabama guy, is starting to make his way in the SEC. Maybe can get Tennessee back to where they were when they were a powerhouse. It's funny because they won a national championship the year after Peyton Manning left. Maybe Tennessee can get back into things in the SEC East, which seems to be dominated by Georgia or Florida now, and everyone else is an afterthought. One of the other things that happened this weekend that I really want to get to, we could spend the last half hour talking about it. We have a guest by the name of Brian Snow. We know him as a snowman, coming on at 1:30. He's a bit of a sports historian like I am. The Last Dance show that ESPN put on, it's a 10-part series about the Bulls final season under Phil Jackson, Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, and that crew, the second of the three-peats. Episodes 3 and 4 aired last night. Among the things talked about were their relationship with Isaiah Thomas, and at the end of the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals, where the Pistons walked off the court, it was said that Lambeer was the one who instigated that. The rest of them went along with it because of the fact that Jordan came out in Game 3 and said he didn't like the Pistons as people, that they were bad people, and that rubbed them the wrong way. What do you guys think of that? Frank, you go first.
First of all, he's right. First of all. Second of all, what does it matter? It's about what happens on the court. So it's not a personal thing. The Detroit Pistons at their best have always been an aggressive team, even the newer versions of the Detroit Pistons. It's all about aggression. It's about being the toughest ones out there. It's what they promote. Even their 2020 version is going to be like that. And in moving in the future because of their coach and because of defense. So what do I think of the Bulls having that kind of conversation and Jordan talking that way? Talking smack isn't something that just started recently. It's been going on for a long time. And sometimes, you know, I don't know how many players get away with it. And Lance, I don't know how you feel about it, but you know, some players are able to goad the other team and put up, if you understand what I'm saying. It's one thing about writing a check, but can you cash it? Jordan wrote a check and he cashed it.
Lance, you there? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yep. That's okay. No, my thoughts on it are, this was the most interesting thing to me. So basically, this is a different time and era. So we got to keep that in mind. You know, this is basically 30 years ago we're talking about.
Right.
Back in those times, the competitive nature that was allowed to be displayed on the court was completely different from what you see nowadays. And this was the most interesting part to me that I came away with. Now, I remember that vehemently, right? The bad boys have been beating up on the Bulls for the longest. The Bulls finally get off the hook and get over the hump rather and beat them. And the Pistons, along with what the Bill Lambeer, the other part of that was when the Celtics, right? So you basically had a time, an era in the 80s where when the Lakers and the Celtics emerged, it was the Detroit Pistons who needed to knock off the Boston Celtics to get over the hump. Once Detroit finally did that, after the Celtics beat them up a couple years, it was the Celtics players with time remaining on the clock while former Piston Adrian Dantley was shooting free throws, and the Boston Celtics walked off the court, and they did not shake the Detroit Pistons' hands. And you don't hear any type of media pushback. You never hear Larry Bird or Kevin McHale or any of those guys call bad players or, you know, basically have some type of mark or scar on them. And they did the same thing to Detroit. So for Detroit, when the Bulls finally beat them, it was a similar type thing. Now, I don't think it was the right thing to do. I think it definitely shows poor sportsmanship, but I'll be the first to admit, being a very fierce competitor myself, not that it's right, but when you lose, and they got swept. So this wasn't even a, 7-game series. They got embarrassed. They got swept. That last game that they got swept came on their home court. And let's face it, they were just some sore losers at that time. But I do think that if they, and particularly Isaiah Thomas, get so much backlash for what the Pistons did, I think rightfully so, Larry Bird, the most notable face from that Boston squad, I think the Celtics definitely should be mentioned in there as well.
What are your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, we're talking about character, and sometimes character is a two-edged sword. As much as we like players in a moment like that, and that kind of passionate, negative experience, we want them to rise up and be a better example to society. One can't forget that they are a series of individuals with feelings. And those feelings, this is like we're talking, I'm using words that don't fit what the topic is here. But that essentially that's what it is. I sound too soft and mushy for what we're talking about. What we're talking is about, we're talking about A personalities here a whole bunch of A personalities who, from the Boston's perspective, that dominated the league and then found out that they're not as good as they thought they were in an instant. 4 games straight. I was never an athlete of that kind of stature. Lance, I don't know about you, but a 4 game going down in 4 games is a real steep hill, real quick, and it really kicks your butt. And we all react differently, and I think people react differently at different times based on different situations. So there's a dynamic between the team that wins 4 straight and the one that loses 4 straight. Who were they? What are they now? Who were the other ones who finally did that, and the gloating that they must have felt, even if Detroit weren't gloating, if they were just so happy because of what they were going through, that look is enough to fire you up, guys. That look alone will get you going, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Lance, he hit it well, because as I said, pretty much the same thing yesterday. I remember watching that game. Okay, that was a really weird time in my life. Some of you know or don't know, I'm a cancer survivor. That was when I was probably at my worst, and I was on the verge of death, actually. So I remember watching that game from my hospital room. I was only 16 years old, and watching. I'm talking about the Bulls and the Pistons when they walked off the court. Okay, as far as the Celtics and the Pistons, that was a really heated rivalry. They touch on that a little bit in a documentary. By Game 5 of the '87 finals that the Celtics won and then lost to the Lakers in the NBA finals, you had Isaiah Thomas making probably the boner of all boners by throwing an inbounds pass away when they had a 1-point lead with 5 seconds left that Bird stole and then hit DJ for a layup, and the Celtics won by 1 point, then wind up winning that series in 7 games when Dantley and Vinnie Johnson bumped heads in Game 7 at Boston Garden. So they really didn't like each other either. And when Dantley was at the foul line at the end of Game 6 in 1988, Isaiah grabbed McHale before he left the court, and McHale's always been a class guy, and so is Bird, but Bird is very, very competitive, and he did not like Bill Laimbeer and some of those guys on the Pistons. But McHale talks to Isaiah, tells him, you know what, it's your guy's turn now. You go beat the Lakers. He gives him Isaiah gives him a high five, and then they go off the court. Would have been nice to see the Bulls and Pistons be able to do that the way Jordan did the year before when he lost in Game 7, congratulated them and go about their business. I believe Joe Dumars was the only one to congratulate them or shake hands with any of them, and that just goes to show you who Joe Dumars is. But yeah, I got a funny story for you guys about Isaiah Thomas, okay? A couple of years ago, I was involved in a fundraiser for the V Foundation, and Isaiah Thomas was there. It was for Dick Vitale, and it's the cancer fundraiser for Jim Valvano. And it's at Dick's house, and I decided, my ex-wife at the time had to leave early, so she couldn't stay. So I asked my mom, who lives in Florida, to come with me. So my mom met me there, and she, I remember when I was a kid, she had me watch the Mary Thomas story, which was a story about Isaiah Thomas's mom and what he went through growing up on the east side of Chicago. So she sees Isaiah there. Now she knows of him, and she always thought he was adorable because everybody thinks Isaiah is adorable. So she goes up to him and, oh, Isaiah, you're so cute. Can I give you a kiss? And I'm thinking, oh my God, Mom, please, this is an NBA Hall of Famer, okay? It's just, I was so humiliated, but Isaiah was a little embarrassed. And I like to share that story with people. I give a kind of the human side of Isaiah Thomas, who I think sometimes gets a bad rap, but I like him a lot. I think he's very, very kind person, and he definitely, to me, was one of the best, if not the Magic was better, but probably the second best point guard in the NBA at that time, and a guy who I felt really should have been on the Dream Team. Lance, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I deserve to be on the Dream Team.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the climate of the situation at that time with Michael Jordan, who, you know, let's face it, was the bigger star. You know, things didn't work out in that nature. But as far as a pure basketball player is concerned, Isaiah Thomas, you know, I think, I'm a context guy and like to really get into the particulars. But like you said, just as every bit as good as Magic Johnson. You know, Magic Johnson was a transcendent talent in terms of being one of the first guys at his size to be able to handle the ball that way and have the type of passing ability that he did. But if you recall, when Magic Johnson and the Lakers and Isaiah Thomas and the Pistons faced off in the finals, it was Isaiah Thomas and the Pistons who beat the Lakers. And if everybody recalls, one of the most classic, memorable performances by any player in the finals was when Isaiah Thomas badly sprung his and limped out there on 1 foot points. I believe he scored something like 25 points in the quarter, basically hopping around on 1 foot. So, you know, to me, when you talk about Isaiah Thomas, you talk about Larry Bird, you talk about Magic Johnson, you talk about Michael Jordan, you're talking about 4 of the most fiercest competitors ever to lace them up. And as Frank alluded to, you know, in the moment, you know, it's not always easy, you know, to be as professional as classy. The last note, I'll say maybe it was a team decision and you're going to stick with your team, just like you stick with your family. And if the family or the team makes a decision and the greater majority rules out, that's what you want to do. So maybe there were some other Pistons who felt differently about it, but if the leaders of that team said that was the way they were going to go about it, and you also heard some people saying about how the Chicago being the voice of that team had some towards the Pistons right before finishing them off, then that very well may explain.
As we are waiting on Brian Snow for the Snowman in the Morning, I guess we're having some technical difficulties. I don't know. You were watching Zingo TV, part of the Barn Burner Network. This is our first day doing shows. I have the pleasure to have Lance Goodman here of NFL Exporter and Candid Frank up there in the frozen tundra of Canada, bearing the impossible weather that's probably warmer than it is here on Long Island at the time. But this is a new venture for us. Very thankful for Zingo TV. Very thankful for the Barn Burner. Joseph Pitchiff and Eduardo Harari over there at Barn Burner do a great job at getting us the situation they've gotten to us. We owe them a lot for what they're doing for us, tireless workers. Do we have, I believe we got Brian with us. Is Brian on?
I'm right here.
Hey, there you go.
What's
my
up?
Man. How are you? We got the Snowman here. Now I know it's probably not a little warmer where you're at, but this is the Snowman, Brian Snow, Snowman in the Morning. You can find him all over Facebook. Talk about a guy who's dedicated, a sports historian like myself. Brian, been waiting to get to you about the documentary. I know you got some great things to say. Go.
I lived it. Okay. I don't need to see the documentary because for that entire Jordan era, I watched it live. And 2 of my favorite announcers of all time, Mark, as you know very well, Jim Durham and Johnny Kerr, took me.
Oh boy.
They took me all throughout that documentary. You know, I've had so many people ask me, you know, what do you think of The Last Dance? Nothing, because I lived it. I saw the rumors. I read all the rumors. Lazy J. Banks is a dear friend of mine and was one of the guys who chronicled the Chicago Bulls for many, many years. Another good friend of mine, Tom Dorr, who was the television voice for some 16 years, but along with Johnny Kerr before Johnny Kerr passed, God rest his soul. I lived it. I saw Isaiah Thomas and company walk off the floor on Memorial Day, 1991, when the Bulls blew them out, 115-94. And it's not the first time that Isaiah Thomas and company have walked off the floor. They had it done to them 3 years prior in the Silverdome, and the only one of the Celtics that showed any kind of compassion was Kevin McHale. He told Isaiah Thomas and company to go get him. You know, we saw that on CBS. So although Isaiah Thomas has the pedigree of defeating MJ, Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird, he's got no reason to talk because the basic last championship run of the Detroit Pistons during the Bad Boys era, they got swept and swept badly. In fact, the only competitive game was game 3 when they lost, when the Pistons lost 113-107, and Michael Jordan by himself broke up a 2-on-1 and saved the game for the Bulls. And here I see Isaiah Thomas, you know, quote unquote, renouncing Jordan's GOAT status. And the only reason I see him doing that is because of a grudge he held in 1991 when he got swept off his own floor.
Right.
I lived through The Last Dance. From
Now,
91
Brian,
to 98, I lived it.
Now, one of the things that they touched on was the finals with Magic and Jordan. Okay, everybody waited for that. That was supposed to be the next thing that came. The thing they didn't touch on, though, they talked about game 1, Perkins hitting a shot to win it, and then game 2, Jordan going off. Game 3, Divac makes that miracle shot to put them up by 1. And then Phil Jackson makes a brilliant decision by having them bring the ball up the length of the court. And that allowed Jordan to get into open space, hit the jumper to tie the game. By the way, Byron Scott not being healthy for that series really hurt the Lakers.
Yes.
And Eldon Campbell playing because Divac fouled out and Pippen fouled out on that play as well. So the Bulls had to win without him in overtime. But I thought that was the biggest game of the series, that game 3. Everybody makes such a big deal of Pippen guarding Magic. Magic still averaged basically a triple-double for the series. But what it did is the Lakers should have had one of their other guards bring up the ball and then let Magic exploit him in a low post, which they were abusing them all series with Divac and Perkins and, you know, and all those, and even Magic in the low post. I thought it would have been a different series if that had happened. What's your thoughts about that game 3?
Game 3 was the biggest game of the series. If the Bulls don't win game 3, that series goes the distance because the Lakers would have found a way to protect home court. Game 4, the Bulls wiped them out. Game 5, they came back from 7 down and they wiped them out again. If game 3 doesn't go overtime, it's a fairly different series. And you have to remember this also. Not only was Byron Scott not healthy, but one of the biggest factors for the Lakers, James Worthy, was not healthy. Because starting the series, Pip was guarding James Worthy while Jordan was guarding Magic Johnson. That was the first game and a half. And then Phil Jackson made a brilliant switch and put Pippen on Magic Johnson to prevent him from bringing the ball up the floor. Right. And then you had the Carolina teammates with James Worthy and Michael Jordan going at each other. And though James Worthy had a 3-inch height advantage on Jordan, along with the very explosive and quick first step, Michael got him defensively and held James Worthy in check, did not allow him to go completely off like we know. And you and I have watched James Worthy his entire career.
Triple-double.
Yeah.
Against the Pistons.
Yep. He was the first player to close out a final with a triple-double. Yep. June 21st, 1988.
June 21st, 1988. Yep.
In the Fabulous Forum. And I have that game in full because CBS did that game and Brent Musburger got us set up. If you listen to a game on CBS where Brent Musburger does the narration, if you weren't ready to watch the NBA Finals, then you weren't ready for basketball. All right? Let's just put it out there.
Hello? Hello? Well, I guess I'm not on anymore. Oh, okay. I don't know what happened there, guys. Well, you've been watching Hitting the Mark with Mark Everett Kelly.
Continue on your own.
And my name is Candid Frank, and we've been talking about the NFL draft. We've been talking about The Last Dance on ESPN, the documentary about the Chicago Bulls. With us have been Lance Goodman, Brian the Snowman Snow, Errol and Kyle Kleiber. Yeah, I see that. I got a message here from Mark Everett Kelly that he's been knocked off. We're only down to the last 10, 12 minutes. Yeah, buddy, I'm here. If he's not watching right now, and if he's trying to get back in, here's what's happening right now, and we'll remind you that you are, for the first time, this is the first program on barnburner.net, Barnburner Live, fired up on Zingo TV. This technical difficulty doesn't get in the way of the great things that we've started to do, and that is now we find ourselves on Zingo TV, and this is the first program, and I'll give you an insight into what we'll be doing. We'll be doing daily shows. We'll be doing sports.
Yeah. And his signal is going off.
What?
His internet is choppy, man, like nuts.
I don't understand.
Update. Hope you too with us. So
Okay, so you go on and say,
we really
Okay,
here.
I'll remove Frank as well.
yeah, but you start.
Unfortunately, we had at the Barn Burner.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and my name is Eduardo Harari. I apologize on behalf of Barn Burner Network TV. We will be back with you at 2 o'clock with the NFL Blitz. I apologize for the technical difficulties we are encountering, but we'll be back at 2 o'clock, as I said, with NFL Blitz here on the Barn Burner TV network.